that I'll bring to your attention. These are great books. I do have them on a slide, but specifically this one has bees from all of North America, probably not France. But it's a really good book because you can find your bees
Can I see that?
of your backyard in this book. And it's really, really good job.
So it has the mason bees and
And
everything?
if you want to deal with mason bees, this is the book.
She has that one.
She has that one?
Yeah.
Okay. So are you buying cocoons or are you just,
We've been buying bee packages. Every year we buy anywhere from 3 to 5, depending on how many hives we use.
where do you get them?
We've been getting them from woman lives over here. I know her name, I just can't remember it.
Oh, it's somebody local?
Yeah,
But are they honeybees or are they solitary bees?
I'm from Great Northern Bees, from Amy and David. Great Northern Bees, and we have Russian queens with Italian.
Okay, these are honeybees.
These are honey.
They're not mason bees.
That's right. And I have several mason bee houses that we haven't put up yet. It's been on our list to do for, what, 3 years already?
Okay, well, we're gonna get into that, I suppose. Okay, so the reason I use this slide is because so many people don't even go daily through their daily life and not even consider what the bees are doing out there. And they're pretty important, obviously, to our life. All of you probably know that. So, let's see, is this a bad place for me to, I'm kind of in your way.
Okay, I think you're good, yeah.
Okay. So, you see, Anna will come in after the floral resources, and talking about floral resources, and I'll just give you some general information about bees, and then I'll get back into the bees. So the threats to bees, you know, are in trouble. That's why I'm doing this. I think that's why we're all here, hoping that we might make a difference. I have the more complicated issues like climate change, pathogens, genetic diversity, and invasive species are really something that's really difficult for us personally to handle on. But the manageable ones, the chemicals and the habitat loss, are something that we can do. We can get our hands dirty and get in there and do something about that.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
When you mention invasive species, what's the threat?
Well,
Because
competition would be the threat. There is competition between species, bees. Sometimes they get brought in intentionally, sometimes they get brought in unintentionally, but that can be an issue.
okay, so it's invasive species of bees, not plants.
Not plants. I'm only talking about bees.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay. So chemicals, do you all know what neonicotinoids are, or have you heard of them? Very bad, and they're being used in the valley here. The problem with neonicotinoids is that they go systemic, and they're taken up into the tissue of the plant, and they reside there for 2 years. So applicators will say, well, we don't spray when the plants are flowering and we spray when there aren't bees around, or we spray in the morning or at night. That doesn't make any difference with neonicotinoids. They're deadly, that's why they're being used, because they kill everything. And they get in the pollen of the plant the next year, and the bees bring that back to their hive, or in the case of our solitary bees, they'll bring that back to their nesting spot, and the babies will not survive. So that's why there's a real issue. In fact, I'm pretty sure in Europe, neonicotinoids are banned.
Good.
And they are banned on the East Coast. But they're still being used pretty regularly.
What are they trying to kill? The people?
They're trying to kill all the insects that are bad, like the caterpillars and the worms and the cherries and so forth. In fact, some of the cherry growers here are using them. The point is, the issue is that if they even have one cherry in a lot that they find a worm in after they've made their shipment to the distributor, they lose their whole batch. So this pretty much guarantees that there's not going to be any worms or any issues like that. But on the other hand, I don't know if they know what they're doing to the bees.
And to the people who eat the cherries. Because
Well,
you're saying it gets.
they haven't found anything in vertebrates that is an issue. They've looked at that, but do you want to eat that? Probably not, but, they haven't found vertebrates to be affected at this point. And then there's herbicides. What we need to do is just slow down with the application of chemicals. Habitat is something we can do something about for sure, and that's plant a good diversity of native, and I say non-native plants because it's not a perfect world. We're not going to plant, we're going to plant what we want to plant, and it's not all going to be native species. Now I'm talking about plants. We're going to have, oh, here comes Elizabeth, Monica.
Come on in. Yes, you're welcome.
Yes, you're welcome.
Come on in.
Okay.
Is somebody with you?
Well, my husband is trying to call you, so hopefully.
Oh,
Okay.
that's who called. Okay.
Okay, we'll wait, but
Well,
if in a perfect world, we would plant native species in this area to help the native bees. And it's, like I said, it's not a perfect world, so we're going to plant other species. And that's okay, but it's more like having a bird feeder. We're just feeding all the birds, and we don't know which ones are being benefited, but some are. I provide some nesting opportunities, especially by leaving some debris in your yard in the fall for bees to hibernate underneath and so forth, in a chemical-free environment. When you think about habitat, we think about our roads and our homes and our grass and our shopping malls and airports, and there's no bee habitat in any of that. So how do we have to replace that. We have to try to fill in those gaps in our yards, even on a patio. Of course, I know you guys are doing it. But, so bee habitat, grass, not a fan. There's nothing there for the bees to eat. Yes.
There is on my grass. It's all dandelion.
Well, that's different. That's different, and you can plant other flowering species in your grass, and that would help, but that is sterile. And roadside ditches. Well, bees margins throughout Montana or throughout the planet maybe. It's not an ideal situation for bees. Even this field over on the left, that may have had pollen for bees at one time, but it's such a continuous field of one type of plant that if the bees aren't getting anything out of it, it's not over time very beneficial. Here's our our bike path in Kalispell. Now I will give them a little bit of credit. They did plant some flowers along the margin, But it would be good for us if we could to get involved with these projects, with the city or the county, and get them to plant some native species in there. In a big chunk of this bike path over on that would be on the east side of Kalispell, it's grass. Well, grass doesn't do very much for the bees. There are all kinds of shrubs and plants that they could plant, and the point is, if it's a native species, it can grow here without a lot of maintenance, without a lot of water. If it's dry here, the native species can handle that drought.
Steve, the NCRS has a native pollinator plant program where they give out seeds, and it seems like and what they're doing is asking people to have plots in different places where
I've seen that.
and it would be a good place to go and create a strategic partnership where the seeds could end up along a place like this, along with their
Exactly,
signs, and
yes.
advertise what they're doing.
Yes, and the Flathead Conservation District also gives out seeds. But I don't know if they partnered up with these people yet. But hopefully we're going to be going in that direction.
This is my son, he's just gonna come in and hopefully not talk.
Hi,
Come here.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah,
Come
right,
here.
come in.
That's all.
Come have a seat, buddy.
Eventually.
Get here.
So this is what we would like to see. And I'm pretty sure, and just because you're from France, I'm going to pick on you. Actually, this isn't France, but the UK does this kind of stuff. They have planted, all their margins in their roads have flowers and bushes and stuff that's beneficial to bees. Very bee friendly. If we could make our area look like this, roadside margins, we have parking lots that can be full of flowering plants, patios, backyards, utility right-of-ways. If we could just plant those areas, that would make a significant difference. And what you plant does make a difference. And this is because of the relationship between bees and plants. Flowers and bees have been doing this dance for millennia, trying to figure out, not mentally, but physically, what is going to attract the most bees, that's going to get me pollinated as far as the plant is concerned, and then the bee looking for the right flower that it likes or prefers to get the correct or the right pollen, amount of pollen, maybe the right amount of nectar. So this has been going on forever. Flowers have changed their shape, they've changed their color, just to attract the bees, putting up a neon sign saying, here, this is what you're looking for right here. And this is visible spectrum. The bees see the ultraviolet and the humans see the infrared. Now, we may plant flowers because we like them, they're pretty, they look good. But bees do not see red. Red is black to bees. So if you have like red roses, you're really not doing anything for bees. They're not interested.
I beg to differ. We have a lot of red roses and they are covered with bees.
They were pink. Yeah, they're pink.
The pink ones?
Yeah, they were pink and red.
And it had like yellow stamens in the center and stuff too.
Well, they're those.
Yeah, that's what they're after, is the yellow stamens where the flower,
Okay.
the hearts are. Yeah.
They're not.
How about the red bees?
Yeah, because they just don't see in this range.
Well, maybe, could they be attracted by the scent of the rose?
That could be. Again, that may be the pollen or the nectar. And you were talking about nectar a little earlier. That nectar is to draw to draw the bees in. So this is the way a bee will see a dandelion on your right. It's much different than what we see. It's a neon sign. It's saying, here, this is where you need to come. Some flowers actually have like road maps with their veins that you can only see under ultraviolet light. But this is what they're looking at. So in our floral considerations, we have the bee and flower synchrony. That's when, if a flower comes up, there needs to be a bee there to pollinate it. Now with climate change, that could be an issue. Flowers, they may flower later or earlier, and the bee comes out of hibernation and its flower isn't there. And this could be, we'll get into it later, but there are some species of bees that are very, particular. They will only go to one flower. And if that flower's not there, that bee is toast. And if the bee's not there, the flower's gone. They're very specialized. Not all of them, but some of them are. And then we have proximity to preferred nesting, the color again, the structure, the orientation of the flower. Some bees don't like to hang upside down to get their pollen and nectar. They might like it better that way. And then the bee's anatomy. Some bees have very long tongues. They can get into a deep flower. Some of them have very short. Some of them are small and they can climb in. Some of them are big and they can't. And then the floral rewards, we're talking about the pollen, the nectar, or neither. Now the horticulturists have cultivated some flowers and to be very, very nice for humans, desirable for humans, and they've cultivated the nectar and pollen right out of the flower. Two instances is daffodils, and another one is pansies. One of the things you can do is in your backyard or whatever, take note as to what flowers the bees are actually going to. You know, they're going to tell you, because they know. You know, if you say, I think we have some flowers in our yard that I've never seen a bee go to, and I do not know why. That primrose. Now, we had bumblebees in our backyard several days ago when it got really warm, and they did not go to the primrose are right there. They're yellow and they're, got a nice, but they don't go to them. And I think there is a limited supply of nectar. They went to the crocuses. The crocuses are full of nectar and pollen, so they prefer to go to that. So now, yes, now Hannah's going to jump in.
See if this will work for us.
Oh, there you go.
That was quick.
Wow.
Okay.
Good job.
Cool. We thought it would be a fun collaboration if our bee whisperer could tell us all about bees, and then I could talk briefly about some herbs that bees like and other pollinators like. Oh, what just happened? Okay.
There it is.
Cool. Let's switch these. Cool. So mine will just be a little bit more about the plant side of things, some more things to take into account as you're picking plants for your gardens. These are the things I'm going to cover. I've chosen 12 herbs for you guys to feature. I'm going to talk you through some of the medicinal benefits of those herbs, some ways to use them, and then a couple recommendations for your garden, and then a couple resources. And then I'm going to hand it back to Steve. So these are the 12 that I chose. It was actually really hard to pick because there are a ton more that we grow here that are also great for pollinators. So I could have just as easily chosen 12 completely different ones. But these are 12 that we grow so that I know a little bit about the medicinal properties of them, and was able to investigate a little bit more about why they're attractive to pollinators. Partially how I landed upon these 12 is that I wanted to feature a couple for each part of the season, just because as I was reading, and as you guys probably know, it's, you're going to be benefiting the pollinators most if you provide them with food for the longest period of time. So we have a couple herbs that are going to be blooming all throughout the season, for the most part May to September-ish. And then a couple that are really great early season plants that, provide resources and provide the floral resources to the bees straight away out of the gate. And then a couple that go later. So just as you're picking what to include in your garden, think about especially the time of year that everything's flowering, and try to get a couple from each kind of early season, mid-season, late season. Cool. Dandelions, we saw how they look to pollinators, how they kind of lure them in, but the way they're shaped is also built for a variety of different bee species. I think it's not just like the long-tongued ones that can access them, but a lot of varieties of the bee species can access these. And like I said, these are one of the early plants in the spring, one of the first ones we see, so that's really great for the bees if you leave these in your yard or your garden. And then a couple reasons that they're great for you and you might consider using them medicinally. Pretty much all parts of this plant are beneficial to people. As far as the leaves, those are called a diuretic, so they just help flush things out of your system. And they also are known to aid digestion, so you might consider putting these in a salad or even just putting them in a smoothie, like using them like you would use spinach. The flowers are super antioxidant. I didn't put it on there, but you'll see these in a lot of skincare products too. They're just really good for the skin, really gentle. But you can eat them too. You can pickle them, you can make wines or jams out of dandelion flowers. The roots, this is popular as an alternative to coffee, or maybe it's getting more popular, maybe not quite yet, but almost like chicory, where you can roast it and brew it like you would coffee. But those are really widely known for their benefits to the liver. The northern blackcurrant, so there's, I think, over 150 different species of currants. I just picked this one because it's native to our area, and like Steve was saying, that tends to be best for the native bees in our area. Again, this is an early blooming one. It is part of why it's great for the pollinators. I think what I was reading is that they have 3 to 4 times as much vitamin C as an orange. They're almost like a powerhouse. They have a ton of different vitamins and minerals. They have a bunch of calcium, iron, magnesium, phosphorus, potassium, and zinc as well. So these are super beneficial to humans. You might consider putting them in pies, making juice, making jelly, a liqueur with these in them. And even the leaves and buds on this plant are also great just because of their antioxidant properties. Lavender, this has such a strong aroma that makes it really alluring for the pollinators, and also has a large supply of nectar to draw them into. And I may not have all the medicinal properties up here, but I would say some of the top properties for lavender would be just the calming nature that it has, which is why you'll see it in like eye masks or sachets for under your pillow to help you sleep better, or like a sleepy time tea. You can also put it in your bath salts and take a nice calming bath before bed. And then secondly, it's got these antibacterial and antifungal properties, which is why it can be great in like a homemade cleaning spray or a soap, even like a homemade wound wash or certain first aid situations. Lavender could be great. for that. And then one just kind of fun extra is you might think about using the stems as a fire starter. Yeah. Echinacea. This one I was reading is specifically a great plant that allows butterflies and moths to lay their eggs. I imagine it has a ton of other reasons that pollinators like it too, but that was kind of one of the biggest. This one is also called purple coneflower too, so you might hear it by that name. Pretty widely known for its immunostimulant properties, and an herb that you want to take specifically at the onset of feeling sick, because it helps mobilize your white blood cells to fight off any kind of infection. So that's kind of a good thing to know about echinacea. When you're using it medicinally in relation to a sickness, it's not going to be as helpful later on in the sickness. It's really at the beginning that it's super helpful, and maybe you guys know that. And the roots are kind of the part that's most notable for the medicinal properties, but the flowers have a lot of the same benefits with jump-starting your immune system. They're just a little bit less potent than the roots. And you'll also see echinacea in certain skincare products as well. It can help with like rashes and just calming anti-inflammatory properties. So yeah, a lot of these herbs have a ton of different uses, and they're definitely not all up here either, but just showing you guys a couple. Hollyhock, this is the one that I read. It has 5 nectaries in each flower. So that's fun if you're a bee. And then I was also reading that the hollyhock comes in a ton of different colors, you know, the purples, the whites, the pinks, and specifically the light colors attract the bees and the dark colors attract hummingbirds. But as far as medicinal properties and reasons that you might want to be taking hollyhock, it's great when you're sick again. This one is called a demulcent, meaning it soothes internal tissues, and it can almost like coat your throat if you have a sore throat. It is a relative of marshmallow root, which is known for the similar properties where it's very mucilaginous, like kind of thick and gooey, and coats your throat. But for both marshmallow root and hollyhock, if you're wanting to drink it as a tea, it's recommended to do a cold infusion rather than steeping it in hot water, because that'll extract more of the medicinal properties that way, just with it having the mucilaginous, like thick, that'll kind of come out more when it's a cold infusion rather than your typical hot tea. Yeah. They were also recommending putting hollyhock in a bath, which would be really pretty, in addition to being good for your skin. Very romantic. Yarrow, this one kind of has this unique cluster of flowers, or umbral, which helps kind of serve as a landing platform for pollinators, which is kind of unique to yarrow. Yarrow has a ton of benefits, both like internally and externally. It has this Latin name, Achillea milfolium, and that's because it was thought to be used by Achilles in wartime to stop bleeding. So it's known for stopping bleeding, used in like first aid situations. And then it also kind of helps heal too when you have wounds. It is kind of tricky because it can both stop blood flow and start blood flow. So it helps with regulating your period. It's very antimicrobial. Got a whole bunch of benefits. So you might consider using yarrow, either the leaves or the flowers or both, in a first aid salve, a wound wash, bath salts, or even internally as a tea. It can also be anti-inflammatory, aid digestion when you're taking it internally. I did see a couple recipes for yarrow leaves. I saw some people putting it in pasta. They said the flavor is intense, so maybe we'll have to try and see how intense it is. But they said
I was just thinking
don't
about
use a
that.
ton of it.
No, I was trying to think if I've ever tasted it, and I think it's real strong.
And I think I was reading the flowers. The leaves have like bitter tannins, and the flowers don't. So that's something to think about when you're using the leaves. Oregano, this one's great for bees for a couple reasons, partially because of how densely clustered the flowers are along it, and then partially because it blooming when the bee populations are really out and about in the height of the summer. This one is antiviral, it's antiparasitic, antifungal, so this is used a lot of times for sickness too, to fight off infection. You could do it as a steam bath if you're feeling sick and congested, or there are a lot of people that use oregano infused oil for ear infections. But then, you know, of course you can put it on pizza or use it in your food, make a vinegar from it, just drink it like a tea. Very versatile. Catnip. The way these flowers are shaped, they're specifically suited for some of the long-tongue bee species, which I hope that's correct, Steve, that those are all long-tongue bee species. And even what I love about catnip, and I just say it over and over, it can make cats hyper, but that's only when they inhale it, and if they're ingesting it, it actually calms them. And if humans are ingesting it, it will also calm us, kind of has these anti-anxiety, sedative, even helps colic, so that's all when it's ingested, and same for cats. There's also speculation that cats roll around in catnip as sort of this evolutionary trait because it helps ward off bugs. So you might consider making a bug spray with catnip if you're into doing those at home. But you can also take it as a tea or a tincture internally. Yeah. Chamomile. This one attracts all sorts of pollinators, the butterflies and the bees, and then it also brings in some beneficial insects that will help with aphids and eating some other little critters you might not want around your plants. Chamomile, similar to lavender and catnip, it's sedative, it's anti-anxiety. This one you'll also see externally for skin, for rashes, and for inflammation. It's a pretty gentle herb to use on your skin too. And I've seen it a lot with eye soaks. It's really recommended for eye soaks too. Apparently it also makes a great yellow dye too. A couple more. Bergamot, I would say in my research, this seems like one of the most popular as far as a pollinator-friendly plant. You know, it's also called bee balm, so that kind of signifies how it's great for the bees. And it's great for butterflies and hummingbirds too. This one, a couple different medicinal uses. It can help you with an upset stomach or cramping. It has these antimicrobial, antiseptic, anti-inflammatory properties, which makes it great for times when you're sick. I also read that it can help with bee stings, which I think is interesting. You know, maybe when bees are buzzing all around it, you know, then you can use it if you get stung. And the same, you know, sometimes this happens in nature, like where poison ivy grows, often blackberry will grow, and blackberry leaves are great at helping calm poison ivy rashes. So I didn't know if it was a similar case to that. I thought maybe it was, but regardless, kind of random coincidence, but probably not a coincidence. You might consider using it besides like calming bee stings. You can use it for headaches. You could soak a cloth in like bergamot infused water and put it on your forehead. You could do a steam with it to help clear your sinuses. It has a lovely flavor too. So you can use it, infuse it into honey, or even candy the flowers that are super pretty. It's in Earl Grey tea. It is part of the flavor, kind of similar to Earl Grey tea. Lemon balm, this one obviously attracts pollinators, but it also has the extra benefit where it deters pests. Kind of similar to citronella, how you see citronella candles for mosquitoes and stuff. This has some of the similar properties in it, like a citrusy extract in it that'll help deter mosquitoes and other pests like that. As far as some of the benefits to lemon balm, it's really known as like a happy mood boosting herb. It can also calm anxiety. Similar to some of the other ones we've heard, it can help digestion and it can help with rashes when you're using it topically. Just a couple ways you might consider using it: infusing a syrup with lemon balm, putting it in a salad or a fruit salad. It's a great just as a tea, or even like potpourri. It has a lovely scent to it as well. And I think this is the last one, borage. This, I think, is one of the quickest plants to replenish its nectar. I think it said like in 3 seconds it replenishes its nectar for the bees. And there are some plants that can take up to 24 hours. So this one, you know, they can come back 3 seconds later and get more nectar from it. And then it can also be a host for butterfly larvae. They can lay their eggs in borage flowers.
And once you plant it, it spreads.
I just think it's so pretty though too. But
You never have to plant it again.
The flowers taste really good.
They
yeah,
are.
people say they're like cucumber.
Yeah, they're so nice. You can put them in some like ice water and it like
Mhm.
looks nice, but then also tastes like cucumber water.
Yeah, should do.
And the leaves taste like cucumber, but they're fuzzy, so it's just not quite. You're not sure that that's the texture that you want to be eating. You want to make your own. But they do taste good
Yeah.
once you get past that part.
Great.
I even saw some recipes for chimichurri too. So I don't know. Might be making that. But yeah, putting it in your water, making a tea or vinegar with it. And then besides some of the internal benefits, I was also reading that it is great for different rashes and for arthritis. So maybe you'd want to make a salve or a soap out of it and use it topically. Steve talked about these, and I was just going to say a couple things too as you're designing your garden or picking your plants. Get comfortable with messy, you know, try to leave things, try to do your cleanup in the spring rather than the fall, and just put that off a little bit so that there can be nesting sites for the critters. And then messy as far as like leaving the dandelions too, you know, it might not look perfect or the neighbors might not like how that looks, but it is ultimately way better for the pollinators when you leave those. Pesticides, that one Steve talked about, and then diversity, he talked about too, and that one goes for the seasonal diversity when you're considering when different things are blooming, you know, the color of the plants, the shape of the flowers, the height of the stalks. There's so many different things you can try to account for with attracting different types of bees and different types of pollinators, especially when you have ones that specialize in one plant. And yeah, just try to make it diverse. Focus on native plants, you talked about that too. Plant in groups, that's kind of vague, but just meaning like don't just plant one little plant of one species. Like don't just do one little lavender plant, try to do a couple. That'll help the pollinators out. And then this one I just put at the bottom, consider harvesting half. You know, if you are wanting to use a lot of these herbs and plants medicinally, you might want to be harvesting them at a similar time that the bees might want to be accessing them. So consider planting more than you want and just harvesting a couple, or harvesting at a different time maybe. But yeah, I would say if it's possible, just plant more than you need and take some and leave some for the pollinators. We can all benefit from them. And then these are just a couple of really great resources I came across in doing research. And a lot of them are like charts about different species in our area that are great for pollinators. One of them is a Free the Seeds presentation that had a really knowledgeable lady. I guess the Penn State has a whole center for pollinator research, so they have a ton of resources there and different articles. Yeah, there's some here that are more specific to Montana and some that aren't, but yeah. Cool. And then we'll switch back.
Okay, and while you got that slide up, there was one I'd add,
Yeah.
and that would be the pollinator partnership.
Okay.
If you go online, you don't have to like join or sign up, but they have some real good tools on their site where you can just put in your zip code and you tell them what kind of light it's going to get and what kind of moisture it's going to get, and you'll get a whole list of plants that would be appropriate for your area.
Cool.
So that's a nice tool that I've used.
Awesome. I'll add it.
Okay, back
Yeah.
in.
Yeah. Let me get us back over here. There we go.
Okay, great.
Look, it came right back up.
And Chuck and Elizabeth, sorry, you've already seen most of this, so we're gonna have to struggle through it.
It's never enough, Steve.
So-
That was good to review.
Yeah, so next we're gonna talk about bees. There are 20,000 species in the world and 40,000 in the United States. Of these bees, we have different types of habits. The specialists I talked about, where it's one bee and one flower. So if we lose a flower, we're gonna lose a bee, or vice versa. Another case in point, actually another example, is the milkweed and the monarch butterfly. We have a cultural hatred for milkweed and for dandelions. And maybe we need to reverse that thinking, because without the milkweed, the monarch butterfly is toast. It has to have the milkweed. Anyway, then we have generalists, where everybody's happy, lots of bees, lots of flowers, back and forth, no problem. And the kleptoparasites, which are pollen thieves. Like the birds, bees go into nests and lay their eggs on top of pollen that's been gathered by another female, and they leave, and that other female takes care of that baby. So there's probably they're thinking that there's probably 13% of the bees out there are kleptoparasites. And then there's two groups of pollinating bees, where there's social bees and solitary bees, and only 5% of our bees are social bees. They are the non-native honeybee and the native bumblebee. The rest, 95%, are solitary bees, and they're all the rest of the bees. So the difference is, social bees have hives with many bees, a division of labor, they're defensive, and they sting. They carry their pollen in pollen baskets on their legs, They don't carry pollen all over their body. It's extremely important for a solitary bee to get all of the pollen and nectar back to the hive so the hive can stay alive throughout the year. So they can't afford to lose any, so they're real tidy about that. They do fly long forage distance and in that case visit fewer flowers. Solitary bees, they're a single bee that assumes all the labor. There's no defensive behavior because they're not really protecting anything. They will sting if you squash them on your arm or your hand or something, but they don't, they're pretty docile. And their bodies are covered with pollen hair. The pollen just sticks everywhere on them and they're very messy. They fly shorter distances so they can make more runs to the nest and back, and they visit more flowers. And when they're plopping on flower to flower to flower, they're just spreading pollen everywhere. So there's the forage distances. Honeybees 3 miles, bumblebee 2 miles, and the solitary bees about 300 yards. That's a pretty short distance. And so the solitary bee on the left is covered with hair all over its body, and the pollen just sticks everywhere. You saw that first slide that I showed you. That's the kind of bee we're talking about. Whereas the other bee, the solitary, the social bee is tucking all of that pollen into its legs, and it's not losing any when it goes from one flower to another. So these are the mechanisms here on the social bees. They're pollen baskets, and this is where they hold all the pollen on their return to the nest. And I'm not dissing honeybees, by the way. They're great. We get honey and wax out of them. They're extremely important in agriculture, and they can be considered livestock. And I always put the raspberries up there because my raspberries in my backyard are covered with honeybees. You walk back between the rows and it's almost like you need a suit. But they never bother you. They're just interested in doing what they do. I never get stung, but they're pretty busy back there. I love it. And then these are the other social bees. These are our native social bees, our bumblebees. These pictures I've taken locally. The Hunte, Centralis, Nevadenses. This is currants. You might notice that's currants. We have one of those in my backyard. Bumblebees are always on it. They love that. I got that currant from the native plants across the way here. Yeah. And another Centralis. And then we get into our solitary bees. And these are all native to this area. I've taken all these pictures. This is Andrina, most common, 500 species. They're real tiny, and they're a buzz pollinator. If you're familiar with buzz pollination, bumblebees also buzz pollinate. What they do is they get into a flower and they vibrate their wing muscles. They're not vibrating their wings, just their wing muscles, and they're vibrating and releasing pollen. And tomatoes are one good example that you will have way better tomatoes if they're buzz pollinated. You can still have tomatoes, but the buzz pollination really sets them off. And the sweat bees, of course, those are the ones that are always flying around you trying to lick your sweat. They don't want to bite you, but they need that sweat. They're looking for the sweat for the salts and for some of the proteins. And there are many species of these bees. There's Halictus. I love these guys. They're so cute. Another Halictus. and they're so docile. I mean, you hold them in your hand, they don't care. Another eucalyptus. That's on a crocus. And this bee, I took this picture. It was nesting underneath a piece of wood in my backyard in the grass. I couldn't identify it, but it's some kind of ground nesting bee. And this guy here is Ecopostman. At MSU entomology department, they call these guys fancy pants because they've got these yellow legs. I don't know if you guys have ever seen them around here, but they're native. You'll see them if you look hard enough. And this is the alfalfa leafcutter bee. You mentioned that, the leafcutter bee. You can propagate these in your backyard too, and you'll see the leaves are up. Sometimes your leaves or your flowers will be cut in a half circle, and they're using those to make the nests. And they're also they use tubes for their babies. This is a mason bee that's native to Montana, but it's very seldom seen. There are a lot of mason bees, which brings us to the mason bees that I deal with, the blue orchard mason bee. They are also native, and they are great pollinators. And you'll remember this slide, and here's why they're great pollinators, because they have those hairs all over their body, and they plop down on flowers. They plop down on flowers and release all of that pollen, whereas the honeybee keeps its pollen together so it can get back to the nest. So as a result, you have one mason bee can do the work of 60 honeybees because of the type of activity that they use. And they have an affinity for rosacea type flowers, which are cherries, apples, raspberries, blueberries, strawberries, almonds, and apricots. They're used commercially quite a bit, but not around here. I've never figured that out. But here's the mason bee, the blue orchard bee. It's a female on the left, and on the right, that's a male. You can tell by the white mustache. And here they are again. I hatch these bees in jars. I've kind of quit doing this, and it's not necessary. But I was looking for some other species that I was talking about earlier that possibly maybe other species have come in and they'll compete with our native bees. And that brings us to the story of the good, the bad, and the ugly. Our native bee on the left, pretty much throughout North America, the United States and Canada, they intentionally brought in a cousin, this cornifrons, to increase the productivity of the mason bee for agriculture, for fruits, mostly fruits, and mostly on the East Coast. But these cornifrons have kind of become widespread. They're on the landscape. And while they brought in the cornifrons, they accidentally introduced the taurus. These two are from the same place in Asia. And this one came in by mistake, and it outcompetes both of the other ones. So that's a real bad guy. And it has spread throughout the eastern United States, but it seems to die out or not go into coniferous forests. So maybe it won't do very well around here. But that's what I'm looking for when I'm...
I got a question. Is it not as good a pollinator?
They are all good, very good pollinators. That's not the problem. But you don't want that competition because you're going to wipe out your native bees. And you don't know if those new bees are going to be as good over a bigger landscape. You know, you just don't know what's going to happen. So here's the mason bee life cycle. They spend the winter in a cocoon, emerge, mate, the male dies right away. Female pollinates and builds nests. The nest looks like this in tubes. She's put pollen in there and laid an egg on the pollen, and it develops into an adult bee by August, July, and then it stays as an adult in that cocoon for the winter, and it comes back out in March. In the wild, they use beetle holes in trees and so forth, but bees work really well to propagate the bee. And there's another look at the developmental stages. Going from, and one of the, you'll hear that I'm going to be talking about how you need to manage these bees. If you're going to keep them, you need to separate the reeds and take the cocoons out. And the reason is because the bee in the back, that's the front, the bee in the back, when it finally decides it's going to emerge, it's going to have to crawl and eat its way all the way out. If there's any disease or parasites in there, it's going to get infected. And then it's just going to take it out into the environment. And that's one thing we're trying to avoid. You wouldn't have to do this if you weren't trying to propagate them. A good example would be like if you put 100 people in one house. If one gets sick, more than likely the rest of them are going to get sick. But if you took one person in one house all the way along, the possibility of being infected is a lot less. But we're doing that. We're confining these bees to a smaller area. So we have to be careful. It kind of we have to take on a little responsibility. So our options are to establish them naturally. You can, like the Moluccas have done, they just put the bee reeds in the house and waited for the bees to come, and they did the first year, but last year was a bad year. So they weren't too successful. Or you can buy cocoons. If you're going to buy cocoons, do not buy bees in tubes. There's a lot of manufacturers out there. There are people that sell the bees still in the tubes. And what you do is you bring in pests and parasites that don't belong here. So you're just transporting them into an area where they don't belong. This happened to me. I brought in a tiger beetle. When I first started this, I bought them from Salt Lake, from over in Utah, I think it was Provo, and they had tiger beetles there. And when I opened up the reeds, they had tiger beetles in them. And we don't have tiger beetles here. I kill them all, but that's just a case in point. Don't do that. Buy only loose, clean cocoons. And then again, maintenance is necessary because, like I said, we're confining these bees. We need to make sure that we take care of them and they don't just spread more disease. So what do we need? Well, we need a garden. We need a place to nest, and we need mud and the area free of chemicals. Now the mud isn't that important. You can buy this place, Crown Bees sells all of this stuff. You can buy it or not, but the bees will find the mud. We need clayish mud, and in this area, we have plenty of clay. They'll find it. You know, around your house, there's probably enough clay type mud that they can find it. But if you can dig some up and put it in a pan and put it near the nest, that could help too. We need a nesting shelter with some reeds, some nesting cavities, and maybe a bird guard if you're having trouble with woodpeckers or what have you. Maybe squirrels or raccoons will all want to get in there and eat those bees. So the guard is a pretty good idea. Your nesting shelter should have a good enough overhang that the reeds will not get wet. Another thing back, let's see, I'll get back to that. Nope.
That was it.
That's the one. The wooden trays. The wooden trays are okay because you can pull them apart. You can take all your, you can clean them out, get all your cocoons out of them. And as a matter of fact, the Center for Native Bees is now selling bee houses with trays in them. And they're made out of cedar, which is good. So that's another, I don't know how much they cost, I didn't ask them, but that will work also. And the reeds, I might add, the reeds have to be 6 inches, minimum of 6 inches long. If they're any shorter, the female bee knows whether she's gonna lay a female egg or a male egg. And she lays the male eggs in the front because there's a lot of males and they're not as valuable as the females. So she puts the females in the back. If you have a short block, less than 6 inches, all you're gonna get is male bees. It's just how she does it. She needs that depth. So the house should not swing. It should face east and south in the morning because they need the sunlight to get themselves going. They need to heat up. They need shade in the afternoon so it doesn't get too hot. Protect it from the rain and protect it from predation. So here are some examples of bee houses. Let's start with the stump. The bees will use it, but what will happen is year after year they're just going to build up parasites and build up disease. You don't want to do that because you want to be able to take them apart and take those cocoons out every year and put new nesting materials in. The one on the top right, that's how I started and found out it wasn't very good because you can't clean them out and it's too shallow. All I'm going to get is male bees. This one down here on the right, I call a bee morgue. That is the worst thing you can do. And a lot of people sell them around here, and a lot of people are distributing them nationally. If you're going to do that, you may as well just plant a flower, because you're doing more harm with that thing than anything else.
What is it that makes it harmful?
For one thing, it swings. Secondly, it's bamboo. Third, they're glued in, so you can't take the cocoons out. And
They look too short.
And it's too short, and it will get rain on it. So it's the disease thing that's the worst. In order to get those weeds out of there, you have to get pliers and pull them out. And most people aren't going to do that. They're just going to hang that thing up. You know, I got bees for a year or two. Well, the reason they're not getting any more bees is because they're killing the bees. Any other bees that come in there will get diseased. And so it's not something that's perpetual.
But Steve, it's so cute.
That's what I was going to say.
And then this next one,
Guilty as charged.
this next one is good because it's secure. It looks like it's got the right kind of depth, the right kind of reeds, but it can still get rained into. If the container was longer, it would be better. The yellow one, those look like bamboo. The reason bamboo is bad is because it doesn't breathe. It just gets wet and stays moist inside there. Obviously it's going to get rained on. It swings. So, you know, if it was longer, maybe it would work. Same with the next one. Those look like bamboo, too short. So the one on the top left is mine, and it looks like that. It's got the block, and it's got the reeds in it.
We use luggage stems.
I'm sorry?
Luggage, It's hollow. Yeah, we did talk about that.
Anything you can, yes, you can use. I have 3 examples right here.
Is there a size? Is there?
Yes, there is. It's got to be like 6 to 8 millimeters, I believe. And this one is garden lupin, and I just sealed the back of it with regular beeswax.
So one end has to be sealed.
One end has to be sealed, otherwise predators are getting it. And besides that, the bees won't use it because they want that. They want something to start with. you know.
Okay?
And then there are these also, that
And is
you
it
can
the
buy
is it-
these tubes that come out and you just rip them up and get the cocoons out of them. And you get these new and you save these, so.
So the cocoons aren't very fragile?
Oh, they're not fragile at all, no. I put it, what you do is you take them out and you put them in a colander and make a bath, you know, in a bowl with a little bit of bleach, just a little bit, like half a quarter of a teaspoon of bleach and like a gallon of water, just to kill anything. And then you just keep stirring them around and they just clean up real well. And then you pat them in a paper towel and put them in the refrigerator for the winter. Yeah. No, they're pretty stout. I mean, you could squish them if you wanted to, but they're not that delicate.
But you can see on that picture that you just had, the ones that the mason bees have mudded up, that you can see all the ones that are full already. That's mud.
And there's like six cocoons in there generally, so about 6 cocoons. And one bee will probably do 3 in a year, so. And here's the nesting materials again, not bamboo. Crown bees, you can buy all the stuff from crownbees.com. I think it's crownbees.com. It's on a piece of paper over there. If you use any natural reeds, you just have to plug the back with mud or again with just some regular beeswax, unscented beeswax, and they can't get wet. And there are the stack trays.
Are those just as effective as the tubes? The stack trays?
Are they disinfected?
No,
Are
they
they
just
just as effective? I mean, are they?
Funny you should ask. I don't get as many bees using that as I do the tubes.
Seems like
They
it
seem to like the
would be easier to
Yeah.
take
but-
it.
I mean, yeah.
And of course, you know, Crown Bees sells the blocks.
Uh-huh.
They're kind of easy to get at, you know, and get the cocoons.
Right.
But, you know, you just brush them off in the fall. After you take the cocoons, get them nice and clean, and put them back together, and you're ready for the next year.
Now, do you have to wax back the back of it?
What Crown Bees does, what you should do, is they have like this, it's like a filter, like filter material, like a carburetor filter material, kind of, like an air filter. And they push that in there, and then they wrap cardboard around the back and put a rubber band around it. Just so nothing can get in there.
Okay.
So parasites can't get in, and then you push it all the way to the back of the house.
Okay.
Yeah, but what I did this year was I painted mine, because I thought,
A little more attractive.
Well,
we'll see. I don't know, I
watched an
spend every
interesting
year,
program about
I
trying different, you know, like
Sure.
putting different colors on the fronts of the,
to attract bees.
to,
Yeah,
you know,
yellow.
and then it will help some remember that's where they're, that's where they're,
block.
they're little-
Yeah, so they're not flying around trying to find their hole, although they can with scent. Of course, you know, their reed is their reed, they're not gonna go into another reed, but they have to find that hole, so.
it just brightened up the whole backyard.
How early in the season do they start filling these up?
Now, as soon as there's a bloom, these bees live from the beginning of May till probably the first week in June, and it's over. It's 5 weeks, it's done.
Yeah, the dandelions are just starting up in our
Yeah,
area.
dandelions,
We've got a couple of flowers.
Steve, are they air temperature sensitive?
Yes, these bees, well, that's how I got into this thing in the first place. These bees fly sooner than honeybees. And they will
Do they
fly at
sooner
50
than
degrees.
Bumblebees?
Bumblebee, well, they fly like bumblebee. And bumblebees can fly at colder temperatures too. Because they keep themselves warm with that vibration. So they can keep, you know, and it's only, the female bumblebee is the only one that lives through the winter. She starts the nest all over again the next year. All the other bees die. But yes, 50 degrees, they can even fly when it's raining a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit. But I find that my fruit trees in my backyard were not, they were full of flowers and I never got any fruit. Well, it's because the honeybees aren't flying yet. It's too cold in Montana. You know, in other places it's probably fine. But in Montana here, you saw it as late today, people have already put their mason bees out on the west coast. Oregon, Washington, all their mason bees are already out flying. Because they've got, you know, everything's blooming. But
Are these facing to the east, to the south? The openings of these bee houses, or is there?
they face east for the morning.
Yep,
And as soon as they get that sunlight on them, they start flying.
okay.
Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah, but it's that cold temperature. And then, of course, I brought them in because that's what I wanted them to do. But they're wild bees and they're going to do what they want to do. And we, in Kalispell, we have these large leaf maples that are covered with flowers. And I watch my bees go right up to the maple trees. They don't pay any attention to the plum trees. So but at least I got into this, and this is, you know, that's how I've done this. So, yeah, it's fun. Can't tell a bee to do what you want it to do. It's just not going to work. There's another male in the nest. Around there we go. So you need, I leave some water out and some mud. I find mud, even you don't have to buy it. You just look for the right kind of mud. It's got to be that slippery, you know, kind of clayish mud, or it won't stick together for them. And food, of course. And in our yard, that doesn't seem to be a problem.
That's good.
I wish it looked like that.
And so now these things are full, and it's time to store them and protect them for the summer. So you take your reeds out of your nesting materials out of the house.
So this is like in June, right?
This is like the beginning of June.
Yeah, okay.
And you put them in a bag. They sell the bag if you want, but
It's just, you just
Sally-
take them on a tool.
Sally
Yeah.
bought Tool. It's called Tool. She bought them at Joann's, but Joann's is gone.
Yeah,
Maybe I don't know. But and then you just tie them up and seal it and keep them someplace where it's not too hot. It could be in a storage building, garage, whatever. But if it gets to be, like if you put them in a small building and it gets to be 90 degrees, that's too hot. You know, so I leave them in the house because we don't have an air-conditioned house. And that's plenty warm and warm enough to do. And then you're harvesting them in mid-October. And you're pulling these reeds apart. It's real simple. They just crack open and split. And there are the cocoons in there. And it's a little messy.
It's all that yellow are pollen balls.
So we have the mud. Those are the partitions that they use between each bee. And we got the cocoons. And these are unused pollen balls, and I eat these from time to time. They're very good. I mean, they taste like nectar and pollen. They taste like a flower. It's pretty
really good for
They're probably good for you too, I suspect. All these little black things are bee poop. It's called frass. And these are parasitic fly larvae. And this is why you have to wash them off. because you'll start getting this kind of stuff and it'll just perpetuate. Just so you have to keep them clean. And I know this seems like, oh, but it's not that hard. It's pretty simple. And there's the Houdini fly larvae. Now, we don't have as much of a problem here with this, but the West Coast has, this is pretty prolific over there. So they monitor it pretty closely.
Those are the white grubs there?
Yeah, those are the flies,
Okay.
yeah. And then pollen mites, they're everywhere. I mean, you have them here, you have them everywhere. You know, bees go out and they go to a pollen, there's pollen mites on flowers and they'll bring it back.
So you
But
ate,
again,
you ate some of those things?
No, I didn't eat any of those. But if you're keeping them clean from year to year, you're getting rid of those pollen mites. You're not putting them back in. You know, the bee doesn't keep going in and out and taking more pollen mites out. You're keeping it clean. So you're doing you have to do a little bit of maintenance. And this is chalk brood, and I've had a few of these. This is a bee that died from a fungus, and this happens. And you have to be real sterile in a case like this because this is real contagious. So you should clean your tools with some Clorox, some bleach, to make sure you don't spread that. And that's another reason why we clean out the cocoons every year and put new nesting materials in. And this little guy is a Pteromalus parasitic wasp, and it takes that little ovipositor in the back there and sticks it in and injects its egg into the bee egg, and that egg eats the bee egg, and you get another wasp. And that happened. It's just life, There's nothing you can do about it. It's just part of nature. There's another one that's called a syrphid. No, it's not a syrphid. There's syrphid flies, but there's a specific wasp that will also go when the mother leaves the nest. This other wasp will go in and lay its egg in the hole, and you get that wasp juvenile will eat the bee juvenile, and you get the wasp. It happens. And there are the clean, loose cocoons I was talking about, and they're ready for hibernation in the refrigerator for the winter. 34 degrees, keeps them nice and cool. And so the other thing that I wanted to talk about, and I think you might hit on this, is to think seasonally. Bees are coming out of hibernation and they have an empty fuel tank. They gotta get something to eat. So don't kill your dandelions. Keep your dandelions, keep your dandelions, keep your dandelions. I can't stress that enough. Dandelions are the first best food supply of bees when they come out of hibernation. And then you have summer's cornucopia, you have plenty of food. Leave some debris in the fall in your yard. It doesn't have to be real messy or anything, but bees need to hibernate, especially those bumblebees, need to hibernate someplace. They like to crawl under leaves and stuff. And then in the winter, it's just hibernation. And here are those two books that I showed you before. So what can we do? Reduce and eliminate the use of chemicals, provide floral resources. Succession planting is what you were getting at, making sure something's flowering. When some other flower dies, make sure another plant is flowering. Wide variety of native and non-native plants. Leave a little yard debris for bee hibernation. And anyone can do this. You can do it cheaply. You don't have to spend a lot of money. It's easy. Follow the guidelines to get, healthy mason bees, and spend time watching your bees. Again, the bees will tell you what flowers they like. All of those flowers you showed us today, we have in our yard. everyone.
Well, not the chamomile.
Oh,
I
not the
didn't have
chamomile,
any last
okay.
year.
But, and
Everything else.
Monica's have them all too. And it's pretty much the same slide, I mean, it's, so, that's, I hope that was enjoyable.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about attractancy, you know, that you use?
Oh, the spray?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, is it worth it to get that?
well, I have some for you, by the way, I'll bring it over. Yeah, I think it is, I don't know, I
Well,
mean,
explain, you
it's
can
just
try
a,
this.
it's a hormonal thing that, you know,
Spray.
is bee hormone and the other bees smell it and it's an attractant.
You spray it on the tubes, right?
No, just out in the house.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
not in the tubes, because if you, I think it, and that, I'm just making an assumption here, but if you spray it on the tubes, each female has their own scent.
Mhm.
So it might interfere with that.
It might interfere with
Could be.
the desirability of a single hole,
Okay.
something like that. I don't know, I think around the house is probably a good idea,
Okay.
so.
Yeah, okay, so you get that at the Crown Bee
Yeah,
store.
mhm.
So do you need it? Maybe, maybe not.
But, you know, maybe when you're first getting started.
Yeah, definitely, you know, well, like for you, you're trying to attract bees
No,
without bringing them, without buying them.
well,
So,
yeah,
you know, but you have bees because you have an orchard.
well, we have a lot of bumblebees. A lot
That's
of
good,
bumblebees.
too.
Yeah, and they're great, you know, I'd like to have the mason bees too, because they simply do so many flowers, you know, great pollination.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think I'm gonna try those trays, those wooden trays. I think I'm gonna order some of those, just because they look much easier to open up and then maybe sterilize afterward too. You know, you could just kind of brush them with bleach water or something, you know.
Why go to all that work if you can
this
just?
isn't that hard to open up.
Well, I know they're not,
I mean, you know,
I know, but
Steve, you did not
Tedious,
mention
maybe.
time as a partner. THYME time.
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
time. No,
that's
time.
fantastic.
I
And it
found
moves
that
along.
we didn't have any pollinators when we moved to the property, and I planted thyme everywhere.
And they were
oregano.
And we-
all kinds of time.
And we have that, and they go to it for sure.
Instead of the oregano, they like that time.
Oh, the oregano, we've had so many bees on that oregano.
Yeah,
It's just been
yeah. I mean, they did come later, but at first they went for the time.
That's
Steve, why go to all the problem of sterilizing that stuff if you could just, harvest lovage stems every year?
But they're so big, the diameter is huge. Just
Yeah,
like my bag.
if lovage, they may be too big.
Yeah.
But it
Mine
has
is-
all different sizes.
Yeah, you can cut them when they're smaller or whatever, that's
See,
okay.
I was going to save it for you, but the diameter was like this.
Yeah, and you can save some, I got some, and I think they might have been the lupins are
Yeah,
really good.
You know, garden lupin,
Garden
not the,
lupin.
not the, I know we call it garden lupin, not the wild,
Just the-
out in the.
It's out in the
Yeah,
hybrid.
they're
It's
too
just
small.
The
bigger.
hybrid.
Yeah, but then, and then again, you know what teasel is?
That also makes really good sense.
Do you know what teasel is?
No,
Teasel? I'm meaning to get a slide of it. Teasel is a big, gnarly,
A split.
thorny head
Yeah.
that grows in the marsh.
Like there's a ton of
And
nine
they're
pipes, down by nine pipes.
They're about this tall, and down by 9 pipes, they grow all over the place, and they're also hollow, and they're supposed to be good.
We saw skunk cabbage in full flower.
Really?
Yesterday on the way back. Yeah, right at the big turn that goes out from 35 into Polson.
Yeah.
You look down on the south side and you'll see, it's just a beautiful stand of gorgeous yellow flowers.
Last year was such a bad year for bees. That freeze killed all the flowers on the broadleaf maples there wasn't any in town. You know, generally you go through Kalispell and the ground is yellow from those flowers, and there weren't any. And I actually, except bumblebees. There were quite a few bumblebees last year.
Yeah.
But,
But you don't have to order reeds, if you have
yeah,
enough,
no,
if
use,
you have enough of the right,
if you
Well,
can
one of
find,
the things that occurs to me isn't just cost, is of buying them to begin with, is the replacement of them every year. If you have, and,
if you can find them naturally,
and
that's,
cleaning them and all of
yeah,
that.
if you can find them, you're gonna split them apart anyway.
Mhm.
I mean, if you can find them naturally,
That'd be the
grow in
best.
your garden or whatever, it's
Yeah.
great, do it, for
You
sure.
guys have cats?
But you need to, you just have to remember you have to seal the one end, but otherwise you're fine. They'll use whatever they,
It's
whatever.
on here, I can find it.